Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlicker, shills, death slaves, serfs, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm Useful Idiot. Welcome. And let's go to Saudi Arabia and talk about the fact that Saudi Arabia is implementing austerity, and they have been for a while. And to re-clarify, austerity is something that we're used to seeing in places like Greece and Italy and Spain and all these countries that are broke and having all these problems with their banks and their economies and their budgets and having to make cutbacks. So we're also used to the IMF and the World Bank going around and implementing austerity measures in order to give countries that are struggling loans. So kind of surprising to find out that Saudi Arabia, one of the richest countries in the world, is implementing austerity. And of course we know it's because the fallback in oil prices, but also because of the fact that Saudi Arabia is aware of some things that maybe the rest of the world doesn't know yet, and they're moving their economy away from being based solely on oil revenues because they see the writing on the wall. And so anyway, let's go into some of these details because it's like I say, it's pretty interesting to think about a country this rich having to implement austerity. So the economy runs on state spending projects, and that's another thing to bear in mind. And so that's where they're going to have to cut back. And one of the ways they have done that is paying off a lot of projects, halting a lot of projects, and laying a bunch of people off. Their budget deficit declined from 366 billion in 2015 to 297 billion in 2016. So that's an amazing drop. Let's see, nearly 70, well, about 70 billion in revenues that have changed. So that's the amount of austerity that they've implemented, a 70 billion drop in their total budget deficit. So that shows how much of a radical cuts that they have made. And they hired a firm to find another 10 to 20 billion dollars in project savings and cuts. And they've already canceled 20 billion dollars in projects. And recently, the Saudi minister even cut back the salaries of ministers, Saudi Arabian ministers, by 20%, including a lot of allowances and bonuses and things like that. And they've halted or restructured projects across the whole country the last 2 years, and also delayed project payments by $105 billion. So this is some serious stuff and some big numbers. Saudi construction companies like Bin Laden and Saudi Ogre owe local and foreign banks tens of billions of dollars. So it's something we need to be aware of as well, because if there's any problems in Saudi Arabia, or if they have any problem with payments, then it's going to ripple through the banking industry across the globe. But infrastructure contracts fell by 44% in 2016, by down to 100 billion. And once again, that sounds like a lot to a lot of people, but they spent 178 billion in 2015 and 186 billion in 2014. So to cut that in half, 50% is pretty sizable. They have a 12% unemployment rate there now, but it's kind of really hard to get the big picture of employment in Saudi Arabia, because they're all the natives and Saudis are guaranteed a certain amount of pay by the state, but they have 2.45 million Indian workers, for example, and they have Korean workers and workers from all over the world. But that's a lot of foreign workers to have there, and they're going to really feel the brunt of austerity. And in fact, last May, 50,000 people were laid off in one fell swoop by construction companies, and there's rumors that Bin Laden is going to lay off 77,000. So these are huge numbers, and they don't really have any problem, of course, firing a bunch of foreign workers, because it's not really going to affect anything there. And then they did release a certain amount of money to aid these people, but there's been a lot of controversy for years about the practices of Saudi Arabia and the way they treat foreign workers. And in fact, a lot of it amounts to slave labor. And a lot of these people, once they get to Saudi Arabia, kind of feel trapped. And but that's another story, and I'm not going to get into that. But the new Saudi king, when he took power, of course, came up with this new program called Vision 2030, and that's this whole shift to a non-oil-based economy that they're going to try to do, but it's going to be very difficult, needless to say. I mean, the fact that their entire economy is based on oil revenues right now, almost entirely, and then state spending. This is going to be really interesting to see how they're going to pull this off. Now, let's also remember that over this last year, Saudi Arabia, for the first time in their history, went into the bond markets and got into the debt market. and trying to raise money. So another symptom of the fact that they're living on austerity. They're cutting capital expenditures by 70%. I mean, that's huge. If you did that in countries in the West, there would be all kinds of carnage and chaos. And the growth, if you look at the growth numbers, you can see how dramatic their drop in revenues has been because of oil revenues. And this shift in 2015, they had a 3.4% growth, but last year, 2016, they only had 0.6%. So really amazing. But the thing, of course, I have to ask is that just like other countries, Saudi Arabia is not much different. They're cutting back all their benefits for the people in the country and bringing in these austerity measures, but they're still spending like crazy on their military. They've had some of the largest contracts in world history, buying weapons from the United States and Britain over the last several years. So they are, of course, armed to the teeth. And part of that quotient, of course, is they also have a very, very expensive ongoing war that people don't pay attention to anymore in Yemen, a bloodbath. And of course, Saudi Arabia is more than willing to cut back on all the benefits for their citizens in order to finance this war, because that's the way countries work these days. And then the other thing, of course, a part of that is that not only are they going to continue this war in Yemen, but the royals themselves are going to continue their lavish lifestyles, buying real estate all over the world, and driving gold Cadillacs and Rolls Royces and the like. And so, of course, the aristocrats and the elites are not going to have to cut back. That's for everybody else. And then the other bottom line, of course, is I wonder if they've cut back the money that they've given to the Clinton Foundation, and also I wonder if they've kind of hit up the Bush family, because the Bush family and the Saudi Arabian aristocracy is very close, and maybe they can get some cheap loans from the Bush family. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too?